He said it right in front of my husband's casket. Now we can finally sell her stuff. My own son, at his father's funeral. But what shattered me wasn't just the word sit, was the smirk he gave his wife when he said it. Like I was already gone. Like I'd died too. Then the next morning, he showed up with a clipboard and retirement home brochures and called a lawyer behind my back to have me declared mentally unfit. But what Thomas didn't know, Robert left me everything. And before he could sell a single spoon, I sold it all first. Before we begin, let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. I'm Margaret, though Robert always called me Maggie. The October wind whispers through our Vermont farmhouse correction. My farmhouse now. Even after 2 months, that thought still catches in my throat like a fishbone. The morning light streams across my kitchen table where I'm warming my hands around a coffee mug, watching dust motes dance in the silence. It's the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. 43 years we shared here, raising our boys, watching seasons paint the maple trees gold and crimson. Now the rooms feel too large, too empty. Thomas stopped by yesterday, all polished smile and Brooks Brothers blazer. "Just checking on you, Mom," he said, but his eyes kept drifting to the antique corner cabinet. I've seen that look before in Robert's old hunting dog when she spotted a rabbit. I remember the day Robert installed our bedroom safe, tucking it beneath the floorboards like a secret heart beneath the house. Insurance, he'd called it with that quiet smile of his. Now I understand what he meant. My fingers trace the coffee mug's rim, and I think about that safe, about the papers inside, about how Thomas doesn't know. The house creaks around me, familiar as an old lullaby. But lately, those creaks sound different, like warnings, like whispers telling me to keep my guard up. The funeral casseroles are still coming, but something colder than grief is settling in these walls. Grief doesn't change, people it reveals them. The funeral was 3 days ago, though it feels both closer and farther than that. You know how time gets strange when you're grieving? But there's one moment that stands out sharp as broken glass in all that fog of black dresses and sympathy casseroles. I was standing near Robert's casket, touching the polished wood one last time. The flower arrangements were overwhelming, all those lilies Thomas had insisted on, their scent thick enough to choke on. That's when I heard it. Thomas, leaning close to his brother near the guest book, speaking in what he thought was a whisper. Now we can finally sell her stuff. Not Dad's stuff, not their things. Her stuff, my stuff. My hand froze on the casket. The room tilted sideways for a moment, but I kept my face smooth as pond ice. Years of hosting Christmas dinners through migraines had taught me that much, at least. I watched them from the corner of my eye. Thomas in his perfect charcoal suit, gesturing with those manicured hands Robert had always teased him about. Have you ever felt your whole world shift in 6 words? It's like someone pulled a thread, and suddenly the whole tapestry of what you thought you knew starts unraveling. I made it through the rest of the service on autopilot, nodding at the right moments, accepting hugs I couldn't feel. My mind was stuck on that whisper, playing it over and over like a broken record. When I got home that night, I didn't cry. I sat in Robert's old armchair and listened to the house settle around me. Really listened, maybe for the first time since he'd gone. The next morning, right on schedule, Thomas showed up. He had a clipboard tucked under one arm, and that smile, you know the one. The kind real estate agents practice in mirrors. His wife Caroline trailed behind him, all sympathetic head tilts and designer perfume. "Mom," he said, giving me one of those careful hugs. "We've been thinking about what's best for you." I bet you have, I thought, but I just smiled and offered them tea. The good china even, the kind Robert's mother had left us. "This place is just so big for one person," Caroline said, her eyes already measuring the width of my living room walls. "And all these stairs. We're worried about you, Maggie." "That's sweet of you," I said, pouring Earl Grey into cups that had survived 4 decades of Sunday dinners. My hands didn't shake at all. Thomas clicked his pen, all business now. "We've been looking at some really nice retirement communities. Very active social calendar, no maintenance worries." I watched him make notes on his clipboard while Caroline circled my furniture like a well-dressed vulture. She lingered by the Chippendale secretary desk Robert had restored the summer before last. "This piece really is lovely," she said, "but it would be so much work to move." "Oh, I don't know," I said mildly. "Robert and I managed just fine when we brought it home." Thomas's pen paused. "That was years ago, Mom. Things are different now." They certainly were. I played along for the next hour, nodding at their suggestions, making appropriate noises of consideration. All the while, my mind was racing beneath the surface like a river under ice. They wanted me gone. That much was crystal clear. But why the rush? What was driving this sudden concern for my welfare? When they finally left, promising to return with brochures and options, I stood at my kitchen window and watched Thomas's BMW pull away. The autumn light caught his license plate, Topagnant, and I remembered how proud he'd been when he first got it, how Robert had laughed and said, "Well, there goes Subtle." My tea had gone cold, but I drank it anyway. The bitter taste matched my mood perfectly. They thought they had it all figured out, had me all figured out. Poor widow, too fragile to manage on her own, too trusting to see through their help. I set the cup down with a quiet click against the saucer. Maybe they were right about one thing. This house was too big for one person, but I'd be damned if I'd let them decide when or how I left it. That night, the house felt different. Every creak, every shadow seemed to whisper secrets I hadn't been ready to hear before. You know how silence can feel like it's waiting for something? That's what it was like, walking down that hallway to our bedroom, Robert's and mine. The dresser stood exactly where it always had, solid oak with brass handles that needed polishing. How many times had I knelt beside it to fetch something from the safe? But this time, my knees protested as I lowered myself to the floor. Funny how you notice these little betrayals of age at the strangest moments. My fingers found the edge of the loose board, third from the wall, just like always. Robert had been so particular about hiding it, making sure the grain matched perfectly. I could almost hear his voice. "Details matter, Maggie. That's where most folks slip up." The metal of the safe felt cool against my fingertips. When was the last time we'd opened it? Must have been 2 years ago, when Robert insisted on reviewing all our important papers. He'd been so serious that day, methodically going through everything. Now I wondered if he'd known something I hadn't. You ever notice how some moments seem to stretch out, like honey dripping from a spoon? That's how it felt, turning that combination. 18743, our wedding date. The mechanism clicked, and I held my breath. Inside, everything was exactly as we'd left it. Insurance policies, birth certificates, the children's school records, all those paper milestones of a life built together. But it was the deed I wanted. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted it out, the paper soft and yellowed at the creases. I unfolded it carefully under the bedside lamp. And there it was, clear as day. My name, just mine. Margaret Ann Sullivan, sole owner. The date showed Robert had done this years ago, transferred everything to me without ever mentioning it. My throat got tight, and I had to press my hand against my mouth. That wonderful, quiet man, he'd been protecting me all along. While I'd been worrying about china patterns and Christmas cards, he'd been laying foundations I couldn't see. I don't know how long I sat there on the floor, holding that piece of paper like it was made of gold. Could have been minutes, could have been hours. The bedroom window was open a crack, and I could smell wood smoke from somebody's chimney. It reminded me of all those autumn evenings Robert and I had spent on the porch, planning and dreaming. "Well," I said out loud, smoothing the deed with careful fingers, "looks like you left me one last gift, love." But life has a way of answering hope with hardship. 2 days later, I was standing in my kitchen, staring at court documents that made my hands shake for a different reason. The words swam before my eyes: petition for determination of mental incompetence, and emergency guardianship request. Thomas hadn't wasted any time. The papers claimed I was displaying concerning behaviors and unable to manage financial decisions independently. There were carefully worded suggestions about cognitive decline and vulnerability to exploitation. I had to sit down. The kitchen chair scraped against the floor, the same sound it had made for 40 years, but now it felt like a warning. Thomas wasn't just trying to pressure me into selling. He was trying to take my choices away completely. Fast and legal, with all the right paperwork. My tea went cold on the table while I read every word. Twice. The petition was thorough. I'll give him that. He'd even included concerned observations from neighbors about seeing me talking to myself in the garden. That would be me tending to Robert's roses, carrying on our usual conversations out of habit. Grief turned into evidence against me. I looked up at the kitchen window, where the late afternoon sun was painting everything golden. The same light that had warmed this room through decades of family dinners now felt like a spotlight, exposing every crack in what I'd thought was unshakable. Family loyalty, a mother's place, the simple right to live in my own home. The deed upstairs suddenly felt less like a shield and more like the first round in what was going to be a much bigger fight. Because Thomas wasn't just coming for the house anymore. He was coming for everything. My independence, my dignity, my right to make my own choices. I drove my old Volvo 3 towns over, following Sarah Reynolds' directions to a converted Victorian that housed her law practice. Funny how you can live somewhere 40 years and still find streets you've never seen. But that was the point. I needed someone Thomas wouldn't expect. The office smelled like leather and lemon polish. Ms. Reynolds was younger than I'd imagined, but her eyes were sharp behind rimless glasses. She listened without interrupting while I laid it all out. Thomas's whisper at the funeral, the clipboard visit, and finally, that petition. When I pulled out the deed, her eyebrows lifted slightly. "This is excellent," she said, examining it. "But I need to be clear about something, Mrs. Sullivan. If Thomas has already filed for guardianship, he may be several moves ahead. Have you noticed anything unusual with your bank statements? Any mail that's gone missing?" My stomach dropped. "I haven't really been checking." After Robert, I couldn't finish. "I understand." She leaned forward. "But we need to move quickly. First, we'll file our response to the petition. Then we need to secure your assets before Thomas can. Do you have anyone you trust completely? Someone with experience who could help you document everything?" I shook my head. Most of our friends had been Robert's age, which meant I'd been attending a lot of funerals lately. The ones left were either traveling or dealing with their own health issues. You know how it goes when you get older, your circle gets smaller. "Miss Pritton." Reynolds wrote down several numbers. "These are for financial advisors I trust. But Mrs. Sullivan, you need more than just legal help. You need someone who understands what you're up against." I drove home feeling hollow, like I'd just signed up for a war I never wanted to fight. The late October sky was heavy with rain clouds, matching my mood perfectly. There was a car in my driveway, Claire Patterson's sensible blue Honda. Now, I should explain about Claire. She was my best friend, Janet's younger sister, though we'd never been particularly close. She'd retired from real estate last year and had been bringing by casseroles since Robert's passing, always with a quick smile and a "can't stay long" that turned into an hour of comfortable chat. She was standing on my porch with another casserole when I pulled in. "Thought you might need some comfort food," she said, then took a closer look at my face. "Though it looks like you might need something stronger than shepherd's pie." I meant to say thank you. I meant to be polite. Instead, I burst into tears right there on my front steps. Claire didn't hesitate. She set down the casserole, took my arm, and guided me inside. "Let's put on some coffee," she said firmly. "Strong coffee." We sat at my kitchen table while I told her everything. The words poured out like I'd been holding back a flood. Claire listened, her face growing grimmer with each detail. When I finished, she was gripping her coffee mug so tight her knuckles were white. "I've seen this before," she said quietly. "More times than I can count. Adult children who think they know best, or worse, who see dollar signs instead of family. But usually, they wait until their parent is actually vulnerable before they strike." "Thomas isn't waiting," I said. "No, he's not. Claire set down her mug. Which means he's either desperate or overconfident. Either way, we can use that. We? She gave me a look that reminded me so much of Janet. It made my heart ache. You think I'm going to let you handle this alone? I spent 30 years in real estate. I know every trick these types try to pull. And I know how to document everything so thoroughly it'll make their heads spin. But why would you? Because Janet would never forgive me if I didn't. Claire's voice softened. And because it's the right thing to do. Now, here's what we're going to do first. Inventory. Everything. Every piece of furniture, every photo album, every teaspoon. We document current market values, emotional significance, everything. Then we make a plan. I stared at her. This woman I'd known for years, but never really known. I don't know what to say. Say you'll let me help. Claire pulled a small notebook from her purse. Because Thomas may think he's clever, but he's never gone up against two old ladies with nothing better to do than outsmart him. For the first time since the funeral, I felt something like hope. It wasn't just the practical help Claire was offering. It was the fire in her eyes, the absolute certainty that we could win this. Claire and I started our inventory the very next morning. You know those quiet, focused hours when you're doing something important but don't need many words? That's how it was. We worked methodically, room by room, with Claire taking photographs while I shared the history of each piece. This china set, I said, running my finger along the delicate gold rim of a teacup. My grandmother brought it from England in 1922. She worked as a maid in a grand house and saved for 3 years to buy it. The memory of her telling me that story while we sipped tea from those very cups made my throat tight. Claire nodded, snapping pictures from different angles. Family provenance adds value. Any documentation? The original receipt is in my keepsake box, along with her diary entries about saving for it. We worked like this for days. Every drawer, every cabinet, every dusty box in the attic held something worth documenting. The Victorian writing desk where I'd helped the boys with their homework. The crystal vases from our wedding. Robert's mother's silver service. But it was when we got to Robert's study that I felt my heart truly squeeze. His coin collection sat in its special display case, each piece carefully labeled in his precise handwriting. I'd watched him build it over 40 years, adding pieces one by one, researching each coin's history with the patience of a scholar. This is worth a lot, Claire said quietly, examining the collection. And it's exactly the kind of thing Thomas would try to claim as a family heirloom he should manage for you. I knew she was right. That evening, I called the collector Robert had always spoken highly of. Mr. Patterson, no relation to Claire, drove up from Boston 2 days later. He spent 3 hours examining each coin, making notes, and finally writing out a check that made my hands shake. Your husband built an exceptional collection, Mrs. Sullivan, he said. I'm honored to be its next custodian. I deposited the check into a new trust account my lawyer had set up. Claire had helped me choose a bank across town where Thomas wouldn't have any contacts. Each step felt like picking up another piece of my life and holding it close. We sold other things too, carefully selected items that wouldn't be immediately noticeable if Thomas dropped by. The Tiffany lamp from the guest room, the first edition books Robert had collected, my mother's pearls that I'd never really liked wearing anyway, but the whole time I had to keep up appearances. Thomas started dropping by more often, always with that concerned smile that never reached his eyes. Mom, are you sure you're managing okay? He'd ask, glancing around as if hoping to spot signs of confusion or decline. I could help you organize your finances, make things simpler. I'd give him my best vacant smile. Oh, I'm fine, dear. Claire's been such a help with the housework. I'd deliberately leave my reading glasses in odd places or forget to offer him coffee until he'd been there 20 minutes. Each little act of forgetfulness seemed to reassure him that his plan was working. The trust account grew steadily. Claire helped me set up automatic payments for all my bills so there'd be no paper statements lying around. We worked quietly, methodically, building my financial fortress brick by brick. Then one night, just as I was getting ready for bed, my phone rang. It was Claire, and her voice had that tight quality that made my stomach clench. "We've got a problem," she said. "A big one." I sat down on the edge of my bed, my free hand gripping the quilt Robert and I had slept under for 40 years. "What kind of problem?" "Come over right now," Claire said. "You need to see this with your own eyes." 20 minutes later, I was sitting at her kitchen table, staring at her laptop screen. My house, my beautiful old farmhouse, was right there on some real estate website, complete with professional photos and a bright red sale pending banner across the top. "Look at the signature," Claire said quietly, scrolling down to show me the listing agreement. There it was, clear as day, Margaret Sullivan. My name, but not my handwriting. The loops were too wide, the "to" crossed too high. My stomach lurched as I realized what this meant. "He forged my signature," I whispered. The room felt like it was tilting. "My own son." Claire's hand covered mine. "This is serious, Maggie. It's criminal fraud, and if we don't move fast, that sale could close within weeks." I thought of all those years watching Thomas grow up in that house, teaching him to ride his bike in the driveway, helping him with his college applications at the kitchen table. Now he was trying to sell it right out from under me, with a fake signature. "When did this listing go up?" My voice sounded strange in my ears. "Yesterday. I only caught it because I still check the new listings out of habit." Claire adjusted her reading glasses. "The buyers have already made an offer. Once escrow closes, it gets much more complicated to undo." My hands were shaking so badly I had to clench them together. "I need to call Susan." My lawyer's number was on speed dial now, something I never thought I'd need at my age. You know what's funny? Even with my heart pounding and rage burning in my throat, some part of me still wanted to protect Thomas. Old habits die hard, I suppose. But that maternal instinct was fighting a losing battle against the cold reality on that computer screen. Susan answered on the second ring. When I explained what we'd found, she went quiet for a moment. "This is actually perfect," she said finally. "If we can catch him in the act, prove he knew about the forged signature, we've got him dead to rights. But we need witnesses." "What are you suggesting?" I asked, though I already knew. "We need you to confront him, preferably in front of the buyers or other agents. Get him to admit he knew about the sale." "Can you do that?" Could I? My first instinct was to say no. I'd spent my whole life avoiding confrontation, smoothing things over, keeping the peace. But then I thought about that forged signature, such a small thing, really, but it represented everything. His contempt, his greed, his certainty that I was too weak to fight back. "Yes," I said, "I can do it." Claire squeezed my hand. "I'll be right there with you." We spent the next hour planning. Susan would contact the listing agent first thing in the morning, citing possible fraud. That would slow things down but wouldn't stop Thomas. He'd probably try to push the sale through quickly once he knew someone was asking questions. "Perfect," Susan said. "That's when he's most likely to make mistakes. I'll have my investigator ready to document everything." I hung up and looked at Claire. "I never thought I'd be plotting against my own child." She shook her head. "No, honey. You're protecting yourself from someone who happens to share your DNA. There's a difference." I nodded, pulling out the deed from my purse where I'd taken to carrying it. The paper was soft from being handled, but the words were still clear. My name, my house, my choice. "Tomorrow then?" I said, and was surprised to hear my voice steady and strong. "We'll catch him in his own trap." Claire smiled, that fierce protective smile I'd come to rely on. "Tomorrow we show him what happens when you underestimate your mother." I timed my arrival perfectly. Claire and I pulled up just as Thomas was leading a well-dressed couple onto the front porch where he'd played with his toy trucks as a child. The late morning sun caught the "for sale" sign, making it gleam like an accusation. You ever notice how time seems to slow down right before something big happens? I could see every detail. Thomas's navy blazer, the woman's pearl earrings, the man's polished shoes on my welcome mat. Thomas's face when he saw me? That's something I'll never forget. The color drained from his cheeks so fast you'd think someone had pulled a plug. "Mom?" His voice cracked like he was 14 again. What are you, we weren't expecting. Obviously not, I said, keeping my voice steady as I climbed those familiar steps. Claire stayed right behind me, her presence solid as a mountain. The couple looked confused. The woman smiled uncertainly. "Oh, is this your mother? How lovely to meet you. We were just about to make a terrible mistake," I cut in, though not unkindly. I opened my purse and pulled out the deed I'd been carrying like a talisman. The paper had softened from being handled so much, but the words were clear as ever. Thomas took a step forward. "Mom, let's talk about this inside." "No need." I unfolded the deed carefully, holding it so everyone could see. "This house isn't for sale. It can't be, because I'm the sole owner. Have been since 1980. I turned to the couple. "I never signed any listing agreement. The one you've seen? That signature's a forgery." The man's eyebrows shot up. He turned to Thomas. "Is this true?" Thomas's laugh was too high, too tight. "There's been a misunderstanding. My mother's been having some memory issues." "The only person with memory issues," Claire spoke up from behind me, "is the one who forgot that fraud is a criminal offense." The click of her phone's camera punctuated her words as she documented the scene. The couple backed away like they'd touched something hot. Smart people, you could see them realizing what they'd nearly stepped into. The woman clutched her husband's arm. "We should go." "Please," Thomas started. "This is just a family matter." "That's exactly what it is," I said. "A family matter, and I'm the head of this family." My voice didn't shake at all, though my heart was hammering so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. The man shook his head. "We'll have our attorney contact the listing office." They hurried down the steps, gravel crunching under their feet as they fled to their car. Thomas stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish on land. All his smooth talk, his practiced charm had evaporated in the morning sun. Behind him, through the window, I could see the living room where I'd nursed him through chicken pox, where we'd decorated Christmas trees, where Robert and I had built a life he was trying to sell out from under me. Claire's camera clicked again, capturing his expression. "I think we've got everything we need," she said. I folded the deed and tucked it away. There was so much I could have said. About betrayal, about greed, about what it means to be a mother, to love someone so much, and then have to face what they've become. But sometimes silence speaks louder than words. I turned and walked down those steps, my back straight, my head high. Claire fell into step beside me. Behind us I heard Thomas call out, "Mom, wait." But I kept walking. Some conversations are over before they begin. By the time we reached Claire's car, Thomas had disappeared inside the house, probably calling his lawyer, realizing what was coming. Within 48 hours, the fraud report would be filed. The real estate commission would be notified. The police would get involved. "You okay?" Claire asked as we pulled away. I watched my home shrink in the side mirror. "No," I said honestly. "But I will be." The investigation swept through our small town like wildfire. I'd thought justice would be more dignified, but there's nothing dignified about watching your son's life crumble, deserved or not. Bad news travels in ripples, touching everything it passes. The paper ran it on page 3. Local realtor charged with fraud in family property scheme, with his license photo in that blue blazer he thought made him look trustworthy. The police report detailed forged documents and elderly exploitation. Claire called about Thomas's suspended license. "They moved fast," she said. "Maybe they just knew wrong when they saw it." The grocery store became an obstacle course of sympathetic looks and hushed conversations. Mrs. Peterson caught me by the produce, squeezing my arm. "Just terrible," she said. "My daughter listed with him last year. Thank goodness nothing happened." Thomas's wife, Karen, stopped coming to Sunday dinners, then left town entirely. Rumors said she'd moved to her sister's. Silence filled the house now. Passing Thomas's old bedroom, I'd remember teaching him to tie shoes, reading stories, watching him become someone unrecognizable. The charges came down hard: forgery, attempted fraud, elderly exploitation. His license was permanently revoked, 20 years gone in moments. Justice should have felt different, more satisfying. But watching Thomas's life crumble was like watching a house burn with the photos inside. People treated me like a hero. "You showed him," they'd say, as if teaching lessons to your children ever ends. Kara Mitchell's letter arrived, offering to buy the house. "Some places deserve to stay in caring hands," she wrote. I sat at the kitchen table, watching the maple tree Robert and I planted when Thomas was born. The house felt finished now, like a completed book. Maybe it was time to list it properly this time. My way. Kara Mitchell turned out to be more than just Robert's colleagues. He was one of his former students, now teaching literature at the same university where he'd spent 30 years. When she came to see the house, her eyes lit up at the built-in bookshelves Robert had crafted in the study. "I remember sitting right here," she said, running her fingers along the oak trim, while Professor Turner explained Shakespeare's sonnets. He made poetry feel like conversation with an old friend. "You know how sometimes you just know something's right?" The way she looked at our home, not seeing dollar signs or square footage, but the soul of the place told me everything I needed to know. "The shelves stay," I told her. "Robert would have wanted that." She offered market value without haggling, and I accepted without counter-offering. Sometimes fair is better than more. Claire helped me draw up the paperwork herself, double-checking every detail. No mistakes this time, no rushed decisions. The day before closing, I walked through each room alone. 43 years of life echoed in every corner. The kitchen where I'd taught Thomas to bake his first cake souk, a mess we made, but oh, how proud he'd been. The living room where Robert and I had danced on our 40th anniversary, still stepping on each other's toes and laughing like newlyweds. The back porch, where we'd watched countless sunsets, holding hands and planning tomorrows we thought would never end. "You've been good to us," I whispered, pressing my palm against the wall of our bedroom. The paint was still warm from the afternoon sun. "Thank you for sheltering all our stories." Claire came over to help me pack, bringing empty boxes and a bottle of wine. "For medicinal purposes," she winked, setting it on the counter. We found treasures in every drawer, and cabinet Robert's old love letters tied with faded ribbon, Thomas's kindergarten art projects I couldn't bear to throw away, photographs I'd forgotten existed. One showed Robert teaching our boys to fish in the creek behind the house, all three wearing those ridiculous straw hats I'd insisted on for sun protection. "Look at this." Claire held up a dusty album. Inside were pictures from the day we'd moved in, Robert and I standing proud in front of our first real home. We were so young, so full of plans. "Good Lord, look at that wallpaper," I laughed. "What were we thinking?" "It was the 70s, Claire said. Nobody was thinking. We worked through the afternoon, wrapping dishes in newspaper and carefully boxing books. Each item had its own memory attached, but somehow packing them away felt right. Like pressing flowers between pages, preserving what was precious while accepting it was time to close the book. The moving truck arrived early morning. I watched efficient strangers wrap our furniture in blankets and carry out boxes labeled in Claire's neat handwriting. Kitchen. Linens. Memories. They treated everything with respect, which helped more than they knew. Kara came by as they were loading the last few items. She handed me a small package wrapped in brown paper. "I found this at a bookstore," she said. "It's a first edition of Robert's favorite Frost poem. I thought maybe you'd like to have it." Inside was "The Road Not Taken," bound in worn leather. Robert used to quote it during long walks in autumn, when the maple leaves turned gold and red like they were doing now. I handed her the keys without ceremony. No tears, no dramatic goodbyes, just the weight of metal passing from my palm to hers, like a baton in a relay race. The house had carried us this far. Now it would carry someone else's dreams. The moving truck pulled away, and Claire squeezed my hand. "Ready?" I looked up at the old farmhouse one last time. The morning sun caught the windows just right, making them shine like they were winking at me. I didn't feel sad exactly, more like unburdened. Every step I'd taken since the funeral had led to this moment, not running away, but walking steadily toward whatever came next. "Yes," I said, straightening my shoulders. "I'm ready." The cottage stood waiting, its yellow shutters like butterfly wings against white clapboard. Like a perfectly fitted piece of clothing, it felt made for me as I held my house key. The floorboards creaked not from neglect, but with the comfortable groan of wood holding decades of stories. Different from our farmhouse sounds, yet familiar. Like they were saying, "Welcome home." I'd chosen this place for the porch that wrapped around two sides, facing the lake's mirror surface. The agent apologized for its wear, but I'd stopped her. Those worn spots meant someone had truly lived here, watching the sun paint the water gold. "Robert would have loved this view," I said, the words finally coming easily. I could see him there, settled in his content pose, waiting for dawn's light show. "I set up the kitchen first, give me that, and I can handle anything." My copper-bottom pots, alphabetized spices, and coffee maker found their places as morning sun made metal surfaces glow like honey. Pine and lake water scented the air through screened windows. I took my coffee to the porch, letting steam rise. Sitting alone felt right, not Lonya distinction that took 70 years to learn. Mid-morning, I walked to the mailbox and attached my special ordered brass plate. One word, mine. Not the Wilsons or Margaret's place, just that single word I'd finally understood. Each screwdriver turn sealed my promise. The brass gleamed against black metal, making its statement. A chickadee landed, seemed to read it, then flew lakeward. Walking back felt lighter. My coffee waited on my porch beside my door. Pine scent mixed with lake breeze as I settled in the rocker. A loon called across the water while sunlight danced on waves. This peace wasn't quiet surrender, it was earned, bought with courage and clarity, knowing exactly what belonged to me. The first week in my new home, my phone buzzed like an angry hornet. Thomas's name kept lighting up the screen morning, afternoon, night. I let each call ring through to voicemail. You'd think after everything, he'd take the hint. But my son had always been stubborn that way. "Mom, please," one message started. "You've ruined everything. How could you do this to me?" The next day, "I was only trying to help you." Then, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean. Can we just talk?" I deleted them all, without listening past the first few words. Some conversations aren't worth having, even with your own flesh and blood. Instead of dwelling on those calls, I focused on making this cottage mine. Started with the kitchen, windowsill, cleared it off, lined it with pretty copper-bottom trays I found at the hardware store. Planted basil, thyme, and rosemary in terracotta pots. The smell of fresh herbs mixing with coffee in the morning became my new normal. Every evening, rain or shine, I walked along the lake path. There's something about water that puts things in perspective, the way it just keeps moving, never getting stuck on yesterday's tide. Sometimes I'd stop at this one bench-weathered gray wood that had seen more sunsets than I had and watch the light change on the water. "You need people," Claire had insisted when she first visited. "Good people." She was right, of course. The local library had a book club that met Thursday afternoons. First time I went, I sat in the back, quiet as a church mouse. But when they started discussing Rebecca, well, you can't keep me quiet about Daphne du Maurier. By the third meeting, I was bringing homemade ginger snaps and trading recommendations like I'd been there for years. Claire herself became a regular fixture, showing up with fresh-baked scones and what she called her collection of sun hats. "Can't have you getting spots," she'd say, plopping another wide-brim number on my head. We'd sit on the porch, drinking tea, and watching the birds dive-bomb the feeder I'd hung from the old maple tree. The legal aftermath rolled on like distant thunder. My lawyer called with updates. Thomas's license revocation was permanent, no appeals. The court costs were hitting him hard, she said. His real estate partnership had dissolved. Part of me wondered if I should feel guilty about that, but the feeling never quite took hold. One particularly golden afternoon, Claire and I were sharing a plate of her famous cranberry scones when she set down her teacup and gave me that straight-on look of hers. "Do you regret any of it?" she asked. The way things turned out with Thomas? I didn't even have to think about it. Not a minute, I said, brushing crumbs from my lap. You can't regret standing up for yourself. She nodded, satisfied, and poured more tea. The lake breeze carried the scent of my herbs through the screened porch, mingling with the sweet warmth of the scones. A pair of cardinals chased each other around the feeder, flashing red against the green trees. Besides, I added, some things need to break before they can heal right, like a bone that's set wrong. I picked up my cup, letting the warmth seep into my hands. Maybe someday Thomas will understand that. Maybe he won't. Either way, I'm done carrying that weight. Claire reached over and patted my knee. Good for you, she said. Then, with a mischievous glint in her eye, now, what do you think about joining the garden club? They could use someone with your spirit. I laughed, really laughed, for what felt like the first time in ages. The sound carried out over the water, where a family of ducks was paddling by. The mother duck herded her babies toward the shore, each one following in a perfect line, simple and sure, knowing exactly where they belonged. The morning light was doing that autumn thing, golden and slanted, everything dipped in honey. I stepped onto my front path, coffee in hand, breathing it in. One of those perfect moments. I walked past the flower beds Claire helped plant. The black-eyed Susans had their final showing, bobbing yellow in the breeze. Robert would have loved their sass. The lake stretched silver beyond my land. Sometimes I'd think about the old farmhouse, but those thoughts were just memories now, like pressed flowers in a book. Funny thing, I realized I hadn't thought about Thomas in weeks. The hurt was there, knowing my child saw me as just dollar signs. But it didn't weigh me down anymore. Remember my silent promise at Robert's funeral, hearing Thomas plot? I almost laughed now. I'd kept it, never raised my voice, just played the long game. A loon called from the water, secret-like. Walking the shoreline, I counted my blessings. Health, mind, freedom, everything Thomas tried taking with forged signatures. The breeze carried pine and lake scents. I adjusted one of Claire's solar lights along the path. Her practical care had become as routine as morning coffee. Speaking of which, mine had gone cold. Turning back, I caught the brass plate on my mailbox catching sun. Mine. 4 letters, holding everything. My choices, my space, my life. Strange how youth thinks winning needs noise. Real victory's quieter. Standing in your garden, knowing you outsmarted those who thought you weak. Claire appeared on the porch with fresh coffee. Need a warm-up? She called. Unless you're feeding the fish? I looked at my friend. At this home I'd made mine, feeling peace settle deep, or justice. Sometimes they're the same thing. The newspaper article came out on a Tuesday. I didn't need to read it. Claire did that for me, sitting at my kitchen table with her reading glasses perched on her nose. Local realtor faces fraud charges in elder exploitation case. She read aloud, then looked up at me. They didn't use your name, just like you asked. I nodded, measuring coffee grounds into the filter. Some might say I was being too kind, protecting Thomas's identity that way. But there's a difference between justice and cruelty, and I'd gotten what I needed without dragging our family name through the mud. The fines hit him hard, legal fees, court costs, restitution. His broker dropped him faster than a hot potato, and the state revoked his license permanently. You can't sell houses when you've been caught forging documents trying to steal property from your own mother. Funny how karma works, isn't it? Word spread through town like wildfire, the way it always does in small communities. I'd hear whispers at the grocery store, see heads turn at the post office. That's Hearth one whose son tried to, they'd say, trailing off when they caught my eye. But I held my head high. I hadn't done anything wrong. Claire helped me move the last of Robert's workbench to the new place yesterday. The porch here needed some touching up, and I knew just where to put it. Robert had built that bench with his own hands, just like he'd built the porch at our old house. Your father could make anything. I used to tell the boys when they were little. Now, I wondered if Thomas had ever really listened. The morning air was crisp with autumn's first bite, as Claire and I settled into our usual spots on the porch. Steam rose from our coffee cups in lazy spirals. Below us, the lake stretched out like polished silver, peaceful and constant. A pair of loons floated by, leaving gentle ripples in their wake. "Have you heard from him?" Claire asked, not needing to specify who she meant. I shook my head. "His wife called last week, said he's been drinking too much, feeling sorry for himself." I took a sip of coffee. She wanted to know if I'd consider dropping the charges. And I told her some lessons need to be learned the hard way. The words came out steady, certain. "Besides, it's out of my hands now. The state's handling everything." Claire nodded, understanding in her eyes. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun climb higher over the water. The brass nameplate on my mailbox caught the light, that single word gleaming. Mine. Such a simple thing, really, but it meant everything. You know what's funny? I never once raised my voice during this whole ordeal. Never threw things or made scenes or called Thomas names, though Lord knows he deserved it. Instead, I just quietly took back what was mine. My home, my dignity, my right to choose my own path. "You did it the right way," Claire said, as if reading my thoughts. "Clean and legal, no mess, no drama." I smiled, remembering the look on Thomas's face when I'd walked into that house, showing with the deed in my hand. He'd thought I was helpless, harmless, just a grieving widow who'd roll over and let him take everything. His mistake was in thinking that quiet meant weak. The breeze picked up, carrying the scent of pine and lake water. Robert would have loved this spot, this porch, this view. He'd always said the best revenge is living well, and here I was, doing exactly that. The trust account was healthy, the cottage was cozy, and I had true friendship right here beside me. I lifted my coffee cup, watching sunlight dance on the surface. "Some things you don't give away," I said softly. "You take back." Claire clinked her mug against mine. "Amen to that, sister. Amen to that." If you enjoyed this story, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.